Alright, next up here we're going to do a Tele neck. I've promised this neck for about a year. Finally got the chance to do it. We're going to start by laying it out. I'm going to use the guitar and woods template that I bought off eBay. These guys are out of Portugal. Really nice pieces, real easy to use. We're going to start by drawing out, finding my center line, and then trace the rest of the guitar neck out. Here we're going to find the center line on this piece of wood. This is the same piece of wood that I made my Strat neck out of. We're going to put a Ebony fretboard on this sucker. You can see that there. Once we got everything drawn out, just going to mark everything so it looks proper, lines up correctly. I'm going to lay out everything, even the neck holes, that way I've got it lined up properly as I'm moving along. Here I'm marking the nut. I'm going to draw where the nut is just so I've got it. Then we're going to mark where the truss rod sits. We're also going to mark the width of the truss rod here. Make sure we get that router bit all set and straightened. We're going to draw it off on each side here. Then what we're going to do is take the truss rod and mark with a piece of tape on a 3/16 bit and go ahead and drill along the truss rod channel. I do this so it's easier to route. That way the router bit follows where I've got the holes. So this takes about 5 minutes, but really it makes routing so much easier as you move forward. Just can go through and drill this out the whole way down. I got the tape to mark the depth. Then we're going to get the router. I got this nice Triton router with a straight edge, and just route the truss rod down. Here I go really slow and just let the router bit do all the work. I take 2 passes here actually, one about halfway down and then one to clean it up. This is definitely a slow process. I don't want that router bit moving at all, so here I speed it up. And we do just some fine adjustment and route down. Next, the piece of wood is a tad thick, so I got to take a little bit less than 1/4 inch off. Take this to my bandsaw, get it all set up, and just feed this through and take that off. Here I'll get a push block and just push the wood through. I always let the wood sit for a day, make sure any tension in the wood just comes out clamped down. Then we're going to cut along the profile that I drew out earlier. And here, this is right before I route. You want to cut as close to the line as you can. Makes routing a ton easier. Cut the headstock out here. And then next up after cutting here, we're going to slot the fretboard. This is a nice ebony board. And I've got my fret slotting jig with the template. Essentially it's just a pin that sits on top of the template. And you make a cut, you move it over, and you make another cut. I've showed this template a number of times. In fact, I've got a whole nother video on it if you search through my videos. Just a quick, easy way to slot a fretboard. Got the StewMac fret saw blade as well, so this makes really quick work. Next, we're going to go back to the neck and route off the excess wood from the cut. So we use some double stick tape and we taped on the template. we're going to go through and just route off what's a little bit left from the cut. This is my table router. That's essentially just a hole in a piece of wood with my router bit sticking up. Just an easy way to do a table router. Then we're going to go back and draw the center line on the fretboard. The fretboard's got a little bit of a check on one side, so I want to get that out. We're just going to draw the center line. Take the template back on and draw it where I need to cut. So here we're just going to go ahead and cut along that line, keep it real close. So we'll go ahead and speed this up. So this is the piece of wood that I did my testing on for the strat neck. So I've got to sand off that finish. So here I've just got 120 grit sandpaper. We're just going to pull off whatever finish I had on here. I think I tried 6 different finishes. So we'll just get this clean, get a little bit of a scraper and scrape it off, make sure it's a nice clean surface so that I can glue. And then to fit the truss rod, what I did is I took this chisel and just sliced off a little bit of the end of the fretboard, end of the neck there, to get that truss rod to fit. So next we're going to do some gluing. Here we've got just some basic yellow glue, tight bond glue. We're going to lay a bead down. We're going to smooth it off. And I always like using my finger. I feel like I always get a much better feel for how much glue I have on the wood. I don't really like using spreaders. I've got a good feel to see how thick that glue is going on. Then we're going to clamp down that fretboard. And I always start with getting the edges correct. So I've got a mark on each edge with the center line through the pieces of wood to get it lined up properly. So some maneuvering here to get it to stick right. So what we'll do is we'll clamp one side down first. We'll make sure it's lined up properly. Here, use those quick clamps to get everything set. And we'll make sure that the other side is set as well. Grab my other quick clamp. And now I know I've got the guitar fretboard straight along that center line, and I'll clamp it down. So here now we're set. Now what we're going to do is just line up a bunch of pieces of wood, my extra clamps, and clamp down. And I use those pieces of wood to get even clamping pressure across the board so it sits properly. That's why you see all the different clamps I've got here. And I've got nice even pressure by using those blocks of wood. Then what we're going to do is take this back to the table router and just clean up each side. We're then going to use a profile gauge here and transfer that profile from a fender neck that I have to my neck. So we're going to line it up on where that nut ends and just trace off with a pencil here so we'll know where we need to sand that profile to. This is how the neck is going to sit on this piece of wood. Now I know it's at a 90-degree angle. I'm going to take this back to my profile sander and sand this down. This is my rigid sander from Home Depot. It's a great tool for small project work that's got the belt sander and the drum sander. Really a great price point item. Recommend this one for anyone getting into the woodworking world. So here's what it looks like after it's been sanded. It's got the right profile. We'll take this back to my bandsaw, cut off the face here, and then we'll take this 120 grit sandpaper and clean it up so it's nice and flush. So then in my infinite wisdom, I didn't count how many frets were on the fretboard, and I need to go back and put a plug in on that 22nd fret. So what we're going to do is just take a little epoxy, a little strip of ebony, put it in, glue it in, leave it. So then on the nut side, what we're going to do is just take this little chisel, and where the two cuts are, we're going to go back and clean this up, pop out all that wood. So it takes a little bit, but it gets all cleaned up. Clean up a little chip out there. Then we're going to take our punch and punch out where the inlays are, fret markers. We'll then take it to the drill press and drill out. So here I'm going to do these custom white sand inlays, and we're going to mix up 5-minute epoxy and some of this white sand. And this is kind of a hit or miss. You got to experiment with this a little bit till you get the right consistency. You don't want any bubbles, but this white marble sand will look pretty cool with this 5-minute epoxy. You mix it up to the right consistency, and then you just pop it in the hole. And I only drilled the hole down a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch, and so when you make a little bit of this, it goes a long way. When you just take the epoxy and marble sand and pop it in, push it down, make sure you've got no bubbles, and you just keep moving down the line. So this is 5-minute epoxy, and it takes about 2 minutes to make fret dots. I've done this a number of times. This is kind of a cheap way to do inlays. I'm going to be doing a whole series on this later on. But I like using this sand. It's got a real neat look. Gets a really different look across a bunch of different materials. So we'll just continue to go down the line here. Push it in. Make sure there's no bubbles. And having that template with the punch really makes this easy. Just line it up off the 12th fret, punch the hole, drill it out a little bit, and then fill it in. And this actually went pretty quick. I was really happy with this. It's kind of similar to what they did with the clay dots years ago. So what you do is you just get a piece of sandpaper, and since my fretboard's still flat, you just sand this down. And you can see one side versus the other that's already been sanded. Nice and flush, you got no mess. And leaves really cool inlay dots. And with the paisley wallpaper, this should look out pretty good. So it's looking pretty good here. Next up, we're going to go back to the template and draw the end dots on the fretboard, the side markers. And again, we'll just take the template, mark on the side. I don't have a brad point bit, so what I do is mark to the right depth on the board that I want to go to with the ruler here, and I'm going to come back with a punch and punch so my bit doesn't walk. So I've got a normal bit, and I don't want that bit to walk in the wood. What I'm going to do is just push down here so the bit goes in the right spot. So this awl will really help get that regular drill bit in the right spot. We'll just push this down and do this all across all the markers. So then lastly here, what we'll do is drill the end dots on my drill press. But what I did is I set up a fence to kind of mark the right depth on the back side, and then I've got the hole of where this drill bit needs to go, and I'll get this lined up really nicely. You really only need to drill down about a 1/4 of an inch, not even. Just pop it down and you're pretty much all set. So we'll go back to this epoxy super glue that I've got. Take my 3/32 white piece of plastic, and if you got any extra glue, just put it in the next hole down. You just push down the marker, get your clippers, clip them off, and move down to the next one. So relatively quick process to do this, but since I've got it marked and I use the all these are going to be set up at the right depth. It's going to look really nice and consistent down the fretboard. You can see we're looking pretty good here, and this isn't even sanded. So in the last part of this video, we're going to go back and clamp the neck down. And what I do is I drill out with a 3/16 bit just a little bit, and then go back with the 1/8 inch bit and drill down to get the holes centered properly to the neck so that this matches the body. Here we're looking pretty good. Part 2 is already in the works. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll get this next one posted soon.